Have you ever noticed how fear arrives before the thing you're afraid of? It comes early, sometimes days before, sometimes years. You feel it in the chest first, or in the throat. A tightness that has no name yet. The mind hasn't even formed the thought, but the body already knows. Something uncertain is near. And then the mind begins its work. It starts building. What if this happens? What if that falls apart? What if I lose what I have? What if I never get what I need? The future becomes a room you walk into over and over, even though the room does not exist yet. Fear is like standing at the edge of a forest at dusk. You cannot see what is inside. The trees are close together. The light is fading. You do not know what lives in there, or how deep it goes, or whether the path continues. But you are certain that you must enter, or you are certain that you must not. Either way, the not knowing is what tightens around you. Buddhism does not tell you the forest is safe. It does not promise you a map. It does not say the path will be easy, or that nothing will be lost. It says something quieter. It says fear is not the problem. Uncertainty is not the problem. The problem is how we meet them. Take a breath now. Just one. Notice where the air enters. Notice where it turns and leaves again. The breath does not know what will happen next. It simply moves. Fear wants you to stop the movement. It wants you to freeze at the edge of the forest and plan every step before you take one. It wants certainty where certainty does not live. And so you wait, you clench. You imagine every version of the future and try to choose the one that will not hurt. But the future is not a thing you can hold. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. Not just the things we call bad. Not just loss and pain. All of it. The good, the neutral, the stable, the certain. Everything that arises passes. Everything that comes together comes apart. This is not a punishment. It is not a flaw in the design. It is simply how things are. And fear, when you look at it closely, is the mind's refusal to accept this. Fear is the belief that if you think hard enough, plan well enough, control tightly enough, you can stop the changing. You can make the uncertain certain. You can keep what you love from slipping away. But you cannot. And the exhaustion you feel is the cost of trying. Take another breath. Let it be slow. Let the exhale be complete. Notice that you do not control the breath. It breathes you. It has been breathing you since you were born, and it will breathe you until it stops. You do not have to make it happen. You do not have to know how. This is the first teaching of uncertainty. You are already living inside it. You have always been living inside it, and you are still here. The forest at dusk is not a metaphor for danger. It is a metaphor for not knowing. And not knowing is the condition of every moment. You do not know what the next breath will feel like. You do not know what thought will come next. You do not know how this day will end or what tomorrow will ask of you. And yet, here you are, breathing, listening. Present. Fear tells you that not knowing is unbearable. But you have been bearing it your whole life. What Buddhism offers is not certainty. It is a way to stand at the edge of the forest without clenching. A way to enter without knowing. A way to meet fear without becoming it. This does not mean the fear disappears. It means you learn to feel it without letting it dictate the terms. You learn to notice the tightness in the chest, the speed of the thoughts, the way the body braces against what has not yet happened. And you learn to soften, not because everything will be fine, but because tightness does not help, because fear, when it is met with awareness, begins to show you what it is made of. And what it is made of is not as solid as it seems. So we begin here, not by solving fear, not by making uncertainty go away, but by turning toward it, gently, with the breath as a companion, with the body as a ground. We begin by learning to sit at the edge of the forest and simply notice what is true. There is something that happens in the body before fear becomes a thought. It is a tightening, a sudden knowing that something you depend on might slip away. You feel it in the chest, sometimes in the belly. The breath becomes quick or shallow. And then the mind arrives with its story. What if it goes? What if I lose it? What if I cannot hold on? This is the root of fear, and it appears in many forms. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear that what feels solid will not remain. The Buddha noticed this pattern 25 centuries ago, and he did not call it weakness or failure. He called it a natural response to a fundamental truth about existence. Everything that arises passes. Everything that comes together comes apart. This is not philosophy. This is observable fact. Watch a candle flame. Watch the shape of clouds. Watch your own breath. How it comes, stays for a moment, and releases. The tree in the wind bends because the wind is always moving. The branches do not break because they do not resist what cannot be stopped. They yield. What we call fear is often the moment we resist this yielding. We sense impermanence. We feel the wind, and we grip. We try to make permanent what cannot be made permanent. We try to hold what is already moving. And in that holding, in that resistance, something in us becomes tight, becomes afraid. The Buddha taught that when one sees impermanence with wisdom, not as an idea, but as a living perception, something shifts. Not because understanding makes things permanent, not because knowing about change makes change go away, but because the resistance itself begins to loosen. The grip softens, and in that softening, fear loses its grip on us. Think of a moment when you have truly accepted something you cannot change. Perhaps you learned that a plan would not work out as you hoped. At first there was resistance, disappointment, maybe anger. But then something happened. You stopped pushing against it. You let the reality be what it was. And in that moment of acceptance, the fear did not disappear, but it became simpler. It became something you could live with, move through. Rather than something that moved through you like a storm. This is what the Buddha meant. Not that we become cold or indifferent. Not that we stop caring. But that we stop the exhausting work of trying to make the impermanent permanent. We stop trying to convince ourselves that what changes will not change. And in that cessation of resistance, we find a kind of ground. The tree bends in the wind, and its roots are still touching the earth. This is not a metaphor about strength in the way we usually think of strength. It is not about being unbreakable. It is about being flexible enough to move with what moves. The roots stay connected not because the tree is rigid, but because the tree yields, because it does not fight the wind. When we look at our own lives, we can see this pattern everywhere. We cling to relationships, and the fear of losing them creates a tension that sometimes pushes them away. We cling to our bodies as they age, resisting the changes, and that resistance creates suffering. We cling to our ideas about how things should be, and when they are not that way, we suffer. The fear is not really about the change itself. It is about the gap between what we are trying to hold and what is actually happening. There is a particular quality to the moment when you stop resisting. It is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is more like a sigh, a release. You are still present. You still care. You still act and respond. But you are no longer at war with what is. Uncertainty is everywhere. Your next breath might be deeper or shallower than this one. Someone you love might call today or not. Your body might feel energized tomorrow or tired. The weather might change. Your mood might shift. These are not threats. They are the texture of being alive, and yet we spend so much energy trying to predict and control them, as if certainty were possible, as if we could ever truly know what comes next. What if you simply noticed this? Not as a problem to solve, but as something to see clearly. Today, as you move through your hours, there will be small moments when you feel the ground shift slightly, when something does not go as you expected, when you realize you do not know what will happen next. In those moments, you might pause. You might name it silently. This is uncertain. This is not in my control. And then you might notice what happens when you do not immediately try to fix it, or figure it out, or push it away. You might notice that uncertainty itself is not painful. It is the resistance to uncertainty that creates the tightness, the fear. The moment you stop fighting against not knowing becomes simply what is. And you are still here, still breathing, still able to move and respond and care. The wind will keep blowing, the tree will keep bending, and the roots will hold, not because they are rigid, but because they are alive and flexible and still connected to the earth. When fear arrives, it does not announce itself with words. It comes first as a sensation, a tightness across the chest, a flutter in the belly, a heat that spreads without permission. Most of us know this. We feel it before we name it. We feel it before we tell ourselves the story of why we should be afraid. This is the entry point, not the thought, not the narrative, the raw sensation itself. The mind, when it encounters this sensation, does something almost automatic. It reaches for a story. It asks, what is this? Why is it here? What does it mean? And in that reaching, the sensation becomes something else. It becomes a problem. It becomes a threat. The body's simple alarm becomes a locked door in the mind. But there is another way to meet what arises. Not by fighting it. Not by trying to think our way past it. But by turning toward the sensation itself with a kind of gentle attention. This is what the early teachings point toward when they speak of observing experience as it is, without the overlay of preference, without deciding that this is good or bad, wanted or unwanted. Imagine a wave rising in still water. You can see it forming long before it reaches the shore. It gathers, it swells, it takes shape. But it is not yet a crash. It is not yet a threat. It is simply a wave visible in its rising. If you watch it at that moment, before it becomes something in your story, you see something pure. You see motion. You see change. You see something that is already, by its nature, temporary. Fear in the body is like this. It rises. It has a shape. It has a texture, heat or cold, tightness or trembling. But before it becomes the story of fear, before it becomes something is wrong, or I am in danger, or I cannot handle this, it is simply sensation, impermanent sensation, already passing even as it arrives. The difficulty is that we have been trained, perhaps for years, to skip over this moment, to move straight from the sensation to the interpretation. The body tightens, and immediately the mind says, this means something bad. This means I should worry. This means I am unsafe. We have learned to trust the story more than the sensation. And in trusting the story, we give it power. We feed it. We make it real in a way that the simple, temporary sensation never was. What happens if we pause? What happens if we stay with the sensation itself, just for a moment, before the story takes hold? There is a kind of freedom in this pause. Not the freedom of the sensation going away. It may not. But the freedom of not being completely absorbed by the interpretation of it. The freedom of recognizing that the tightness in your chest is not the same as the thought. I am in danger. They are two different things. One is a sensation. One is a story the mind is telling. The early Buddhist teachings speak of this repeatedly, though in different language. They encourage us to observe the arising and passing of all experience without preference, without grasping at what feels good, without pushing away what feels bad. This is described as the path to freedom, not because we become numb or indifferent, but because we stop adding our resistance to what is already there. We stop making the situation more solid, more real, more threatening than it actually is. When you stop resisting the sensation of fear, something unexpected happens. The sensation does not become infinite. It does not take over. Instead, it reveals its own nature. It rises, it peaks, it passes, just like the wave. There is a rhythm to it that you cannot see when you are caught in the story. You can only see this rhythm when you turn your attention directly to the sensation itself. This is not a theory. This is something you can feel. There is a way to begin. It is simple. It does not require any special belief or any particular experience. It only requires a willingness to notice what is already happening in your body right now. Place one hand on your chest. Feel it there. Feel the weight of your hand. Feel the warmth. Now bring your attention to your breath, not to change it, just to notice it, in and out, the chest rising and falling beneath your hand. Breathe like this for 3 full breaths, just 3. And as you breathe, notice if there is any tightness, any heat, any sensation that might be the beginning of fear or the echo of it. Do not try to name it. Do not try to fix it. Just feel it, the way you would feel the texture of fabric between your fingers. With curiosity, with gentleness, notice what happens when you stop trying to turn the sensation into a story. Notice what it actually is when you let it be exactly what it is. Not good, not bad, just sensation rising in still water, visible, temporary, already changing even as you feel it. This is the beginning, not the end, but the beginning of meeting fear as it truly is, before the mind has decided what it means. There is something we do when we are afraid. We reach, we grasp, we try to hold things in place, and the tighter we grip, the more certain we believe we will be. This is not a failure. This is what the mind does when it encounters uncertainty. It sees the ground shifting beneath us, the future unknown, the present unstable, the past already gone, and it responds with a kind of desperate logic. If I can just hold this steady, if I can just know what comes next, if I can just make this mine and keep it, then I will be safe. But notice what happens when you close your fist around water. The water does not stay. It runs through your fingers. The harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes. And your hand grows tired. The muscles ache. Your whole arm tenses. The grip itself becomes the problem. This is what happens with fear and certainty. We believe that clinging to our views, to our plans, our beliefs about how things should be, our need to control the outcome, will protect us. We believe that if we can just secure our understanding of what is true, we will not have to face the raw fact of uncertainty. And so we hold on, we defend our positions, we rehearse our arguments, we try to predict, we make lists, we seek guarantees. We build walls of certainty around ourselves, and yet the walls do not hold. Uncertainty does not wait for permission. It moves through our careful plans like water through a closed fist. Someone we love changes. Our body does not cooperate. The world shifts in ways we did not anticipate. And we are left not only facing uncertainty, but also exhausted from the effort of trying to prevent it. The teaching from the Mahayana tradition speaks to this directly. Clinging to views is like grasping at clouds. Think about that for a moment. A cloud has no solid form. It is made of water vapor, light, and air. When you reach for it, your hand passes through. There is nothing to hold. And yet we reach anyway. We believe that if we just grasp hard enough, we will find something solid. We will find ground. What is a view? It is a thought we have decided is true. It is a story we tell ourselves about how things are or should be. It is a position we defend. It is the belief that if we can just hold this thought tightly enough, it will keep us safe. But a view is not solid. It arises and passes. It is conditioned by what we have experienced, what we have been taught, what we fear. It shifts as we age, as we learn, as we encounter new information. It is as insubstantial as a cloud, and yet we cling to it. We argue for it. We feel threatened when someone questions it. We organize our whole lives around defending it. We do this not because the view is true, but because we believe that holding it will protect us from uncertainty. We believe that certainty, even false certainty, is safer than the openness of not knowing. This is where craving enters. Craving is the pulling towards something we believe will satisfy us or complete us. It is the reaching. In this case, we are craving certainty. We are craving the feeling of control. We are craving the sense that we know what will happen next. And this craving is what drives the grasping. It is what makes us close our fist around the water. But there is another way to be with uncertainty. Not by denying it or pretending it is not there. Not by relaxing into passivity or giving up. But by noticing what happens when we hold things more lightly. When you release your grip even a little, something shifts. The water still runs through your fingers, but your hand no longer aches. You can feel the water. You can sense its temperature, its movement. You can be present to what is actually happening, rather than exhausted by the effort of trying to prevent it. You can move. You can respond. You can live. This is what it means to let the mind rest in openness. Not to abandon thought or belief. Not to become indifferent, but to hold your understanding more lightly. To notice that you are thinking a thought, rather than being completely identified with it. To recognize that your view of how things should be is just that, a view, not a law. To allow space between yourself and your certainty. Today, there is something you are trying to control. It might be small. It might be something you do not even notice until you pause. It might be the way a conversation goes. It might be your own thoughts or emotions. It might be someone else's behavior or opinion. It might be the outcome of something you care about. It might be the future itself. For 5 minutes, see if you can hold that thing more lightly. Not by abandoning it or pretending you do not care, but by noticing the grip. By feeling where your body tightens around it. By observing what happens when you soften your hold, even slightly. What you may discover is that the grip itself was creating the suffering. Not the uncertainty, not the thing you were trying to control, but the effort of trying to control it, the exhaustion of the grasp, the tension of the clenched fist. And when you release even a little, you may find that you are still here, that you are still safe, that you can still respond to what comes. That openness is not the same as falling. That not knowing is not the same as being lost. There is a particular kind of restlessness that lives in uncertainty. Not the restlessness of movement or activity, but something quieter and more persistent. It is the sound of the mind trying to fill a gap that cannot be filled. A moment arrives when you do not yet know what will happen. And in that moment, before you have even noticed it, fear has already begun to speak. It whispers possibilities. It sketches futures. It fills the silence with noise. This is not a flaw in how you are made. This is how the mind has learned to survive. When there is a gap in knowledge, the mind rushes to complete the picture. It is faster to imagine a danger than to sit with not knowing, and so fear becomes a kind of service. It is the mind's way of trying to protect you by rehearsing what might go wrong, by preparing for threats that have not yet arrived, by making the unmade future feel, at least, like something you have already thought through. But notice what happens in this protection. Notice the texture of it. The gap between one moment and the next becomes filled with planning, with worry, with the weight of possibilities that have not occurred. The silence becomes loud, and in that loudness, something is lost. Something that was always available, even in the midst of uncertainty, becomes invisible. There is a teaching in Zen that says something like this: in the space between thoughts, nothing is lacking. Not because something is added there, not because you have achieved something or arrived somewhere, but because the space itself, when you stop filling it, is complete. It lacks nothing, because it is not asking for anything. It is not demanding to know the future. It is not insisting that you be safe. It is simply there, like the pause between one footstep and the next. Think about that pause. When you walk, there is a moment between one foot leaving the ground and the next foot landing. In that moment, you are not supported. There is a kind of falling, and yet you do not fall. The next step arrives. The pause is not a problem to be solved. It is part of the motion itself. Without it, there would be no walking. There would only be collapse or rigidity. Fear wants to eliminate that pause. It wants to know what the next step will be before you take it. It wants to have already arrived at the destination so that you can stop moving, stop falling, stop being uncertain. But the pause is not a flaw in walking. It is the very thing that makes walking possible. When uncertainty arrives in your life, the mind does what it has always done. It tries to fill the pause. It tries to make the next step visible before it lands. It generates scenarios, contingencies, worries. And all of this noise is, in a way, an attempt to make you feel safer, to make the unknown known, to eliminate the gap. But something curious happens when you stop trying to fill the gap, not through force, not through willpower, but simply by noticing that the gap is there, and then noticing what happens if you do not immediately fill it. If you let the pause be a pause, if you let the not knowing be not knowing, there is a quality that emerges in that space. Not the quality of danger, which is what fear would have you believe is there. Not the quality of emptiness or void, but something more like openness, like room, like the space in which anything could happen, including the possibility that you might be okay, that you might not need to know the future in advance, that you might be capable of responding to what comes when it comes, rather than rehearsing your response to something that may never arrive. This is not optimism. It is not the belief that everything will turn out well. It is something quieter. It is the recognition that fear's noise is not the same as reality, that the gap between one moment and the next is not actually a problem, that you have walked through countless pauses in your life already, and the next step has always come. To taste this directly, rather than to think about it, there is a practice that can help. It is simple enough that it might seem too simple. But simplicity is sometimes where clarity lives. Sit in a place where you can be still for a few minutes. Not in any particular posture, just a place where your body can settle. Then begin to notice your breath, not to control it or change it, simply to notice it. As you breathe in, count 1. As you breathe out, count 2. Continue this way until you reach 10, in and out. 1 through 10. And here is the part that matters. At the end of each exhale, there is a small pause, a moment before the next breath begins. That pause is not empty. It is not a void. It is a space in which nothing is being asked of you, in which you do not need to know what comes next, in which you are simply here, breathing, alive, and the world has not asked you to do anything at all. Rest there in that pause, not for long, just for a moment. And then the next breath arrives and you count again. Do this for 3 minutes, 10 breaths 10 times, and notice, without trying to achieve anything, what the silence tastes like when you are not filling it with fear. There is something in us that wants to see the whole path before taking the first step. We stand at the edge of a choice, and we do not move. We wait for certainty. We wait for the fog to clear, for the destination to become visible, for some guarantee that the effort will lead somewhere we want to go. This waiting is not caution. It is fear wearing the mask of prudence. The Buddha walked a path that had no map. He left his palace, left his family, left everything that was supposed to keep him safe and settled. He did not know where the path would lead. He did not know if he would find what he was searching for. He walked into uncertainty because the question inside him was larger than the comfort of knowing what came next. What he discovered and what he taught was this: the path is made by walking, not by planning, not by seeing the whole route in advance, but by taking one step and then another, and allowing the path to appear under your feet as you move. This is how a path actually works. Think of walking through morning fog. You cannot see 50 steps ahead. You cannot see the destination. You can only see the ground immediately in front of you, and sometimes not even that clearly. But as you walk, the fog parts, new ground appears. The path reveals itself not all at once, but moment by moment, step by step. And somehow, without knowing the full route, you arrive. The path was made by the act of walking it. We have forgotten this. We have been taught to plan, to project, to know the outcome before we commit. And in many practical matters, this is useful. But when it comes to the deeper movements of our lives, the choices that matter, the directions that call to us, this need to see the whole path first becomes a prison. Fear speaks through this need. It says, I will not move until I know it is safe. I will not try until I know I will succeed. I will not love until I know I will not be hurt. I will not change until I can see exactly what the new life will look like. And so we stand still. We stand in the fog, waiting for it to lift completely, while the fog itself is part of the journey. The uncertainty you feel is not a problem to be solved before you begin. It is the actual texture of being alive. Every moment is uncertain. Every step leads into what you do not yet know. This is not a flaw in the design of existence. It is the design itself. When you truly understand this, something shifts. You stop waiting for certainty, and you start noticing what is actually here, right now, in this breath. In this moment of standing or sitting or reading these words, there is something complete about this moment, even though you do not know what comes next. This moment does not need the future to validate it. It does not need the next step to make sense. It is whole in itself. This is what the teaching means. Each step is complete in itself, not as a philosophical idea, but as something you can feel in your body. When you walk through fog, you do not experience the path as incomplete. You do not feel that the step you are taking right now is somehow lacking because you cannot see the step after it. The step is real. Your foot meets the ground. Your leg moves. Your body shifts forward. This is complete. This is enough. And then the next step comes, and it too is complete. And in this way, Without ever seeing the whole path, you move forward. You arrive somewhere. You have walked a distance. You have done something real. Fear wants you to believe that this is reckless, that you need to know where you are going, but the opposite is true. The moment you stop waiting for total certainty, the moment you take a step into the fog, you become able to respond to what is actually here. You become available to the path as it reveals itself. You become alive in a way that waiting never allows. There is a practice that can show you this directly. Not as an idea, but as an experience in your own body and awareness. Find a place where you can walk, even for a few minutes. It might be around your home, or outside, or simply back and forth in a room. The place does not matter. What matters is that you walk slowly enough to notice what is happening. As you walk, let your attention rest on each step. Feel your foot as it leaves the ground. Feel it as it moves through the air. Feel it as it makes contact with the earth again. One step, complete. Then the next step. Feel the weight shifting. Feel the ground meeting you. This step too is complete. Do not walk toward anything. Do not walk with the goal of arriving somewhere. Simply walk and let each step be its own moment. Notice how the ground appears under your feet. Notice how you move forward without needing to see the whole path. Notice how the next step is always possible, even though you did not know it was coming. As you do this, something becomes clear. The fear that says you cannot move without knowing the outcome begins to lose its grip. You see that you are moving, that you are capable, that the path appears as you walk it. That uncertainty is not a barrier. It is the very medium through which life happens. This is not bravery. It is simply walking. There is a way of being with uncertainty that you have likely never been invited to try. Not the kind where you white-knuckle through it, or distract yourself from it, or convince yourself that everything will work out fine, but rather a way of settling into it, of letting it be the ground you stand on, or in this case, the ground you lie on. Most of us have been taught that uncertainty is a problem to solve, a gap in knowledge that creates anxiety. We fill it with planning, with worry, with the need to know what comes next. We have learned to treat not knowing as a kind of failure, as if clarity were always available to us, and we simply have not tried hard enough to reach it. But there is another possibility, one that has been whispered in Zen teachings for centuries. Not knowing is most intimate. The words themselves are simple, but they point to something that takes time to feel in your body. Imagine lying on your back in a field or on a rooftop. The sky is full of clouds, and you are watching them change. A cloud that looked like a mountain dissolves into something like a bird, then into something you cannot name. You do not try to predict what shape comes next. You do not feel anxious that you cannot see the future of the clouds. You simply watch. There is a kind of ease in this, a kind of rest that comes from not needing to know. This is what uncertainty can be, if we allow it. The problem is that we have never been taught this. We have been taught that uncertainty is dangerous, that the future is a thing we must control, or at least anticipate, that not knowing is a deficit. So when we encounter something we cannot predict, a conversation that might go wrong, a health result we are waiting for, the general shape of a year ahead, we tighten, we grip, we try to think our way to safety. But the grip itself is what creates the suffering, not the uncertainty. The uncertainty simply is. It is the nature of being alive. Everything changes. Nothing is fixed. This was true yesterday, and it will be true tomorrow. The only thing that shifts is whether we are fighting against this basic fact, or whether we are resting in it. There is a difference between fear and uncertainty. Fear is the body's response to a perceived threat. It is real and it is useful sometimes. But uncertainty is not a threat. It is simply the absence of knowledge about what has not yet happened. And what has not yet happened is, by definition, not here. It cannot hurt you now. When you lie on your back watching clouds, you are intimate with change. Each moment the sky is different. Your breath moves in and out. Your body settles deeper. You are not separate from the uncertainty of what comes next. You are part of it. The clouds do not ask your permission to transform. The wind does not wait for you to feel ready. And yet there is no emergency. There is only this moment, and then the next, and then the next. This is what the Zen teachers meant. Not knowing is not a problem to be solved. It is a place to rest. It is the most intimate place you can be, because it is where you meet life as it actually is, not as you wish it to be. Equanimity is the word that holds this possibility steady. Not indifference, not numbness, but a kind of balance. An ability to be present with what is changing without needing to push it away or pull it closer. When you are lying on your back watching clouds, you are practicing equanimity. You are not trying to make the clouds stay. You are not resisting their movement. You are simply here. This is a skill. It can be learned. It begins with small moments of noticing. Noticing when your mind reaches forward into tomorrow and tries to lock it down. Noticing the tightness that comes with that reaching, and then gently, without judgment, returning to what is actually here. Your breath, the weight of your body, the sounds around you. The present moment, which is the only moment you have ever actually lived in. As you lie in bed tonight, before sleep comes, you might say something quietly to yourself, not as a command or an affirmation, but as a simple acknowledgement. I do not know what tomorrow holds. You might feel resistance to this. Your mind might immediately want to fill in the blanks, to predict, to prepare. That is natural. Just notice it, and then return to the words. And that is enough. Not because everything will be fine, not because you have solved the problem, but because right now, in this moment, you are safe. Your breath is moving. Your body is held by the bed, and you do not need to know what tomorrow brings in order to rest. The uncertainty is still there. It will always be there. But it is no longer the enemy. It is the sky itself. And you are learning to lie beneath it without fear. We have walked through fear. We have seen how it arises, how it moves, how it tries to protect us from what has not yet happened. We have noticed the body's response, the mind's stories, the way uncertainty feels like threat when we are not paying attention. And now, as we close, there is nothing left to fix, nothing left to conquer. Just this quiet recognition that fear, like all things, passes through. You do not need to become someone who never feels fear. That is not the path. The path is to meet fear with less resistance, to see it clearly, without adding more fear on top of it. To let it move through the body like weather moves through a valley. It comes, it shifts, it goes. There is a pond near where I live. In the morning, before the wind picks up, the surface is completely still. You can see the sky reflected there, and the trees, and if you look closely, the small movements of insects just above the water. But if you throw a stone, the whole surface breaks into ripples. The reflection scatters. The stillness is gone. And then, if you wait, if you do nothing at all, the ripples slow. They reach the edges, they fade, and the pond returns to stillness. Not because you fixed it, not because you calmed it down with effort, but because that is what water does when it is left alone. Fear is like that stone. It breaks the surface. It scatters the reflection. And the mind, in its urgency, wants to smooth the water by hand. It wants to stop the ripples before they spread, but that only creates more disturbance, more waves, more confusion. What if instead you let the ripples move? What if you watched them without interference? The fear would still be there. The body would still feel it. But you would not be fighting the water. You would be sitting at the edge, watching the surface slowly return to calm. This is not passivity. This is presence. This is the difference between reacting and responding, between being swept into the current and standing on the shore, aware of the current, but not carried by it. Uncertainty will not go away. The future will remain unknown. The body will continue to signal danger, even when there is none. But you do not have to believe every signal. You do not have to follow every thought into its dark corner. You can notice the fear, name it softly, and return to the breath. Return to the body. Return to this moment, which is the only moment you actually have. And in that return, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly, the way light changes in a room as the sun moves across the sky. You may not notice it happening, but after some time, you look up and the room is different. The practice is not to eliminate fear. The practice is to stop adding fuel to it, to stop building the story before the story has even begun, to rest in not knowing, the way a tree rests in winter, without leaves, without proof of spring, but still rooted, still alive. So as we close, imagine water again. Not the pond this time, but rain. Soft rain on a roof, each drop arriving on its own. Not rushing, not trying to be more than it is. Just rain falling, touching the ground, and soaking in. Let this teaching soak in the same way. Not as something you must remember. Not as something you must perform, but as a quiet knowing that is already there, beneath the fear, beneath the noise. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are awake in the middle of a human life, and that is enough. If you would like to continue, there are other explorations waiting. But there is no hurry. You can sit here a little longer. You can let the silence hold you. You can close your eyes and feel the breath moving, steady and soft, like water returning to stillness. Nothing needs to happen next. Nothing needs to be resolved. Just this, just breath, just presence. Just the quiet end of fear, not because it was defeated, but because it was seen.